It was Christmas Eve. The room was lit up by the tree, the scent of pine and cinnamon wafted through the air, and the party was about to begin. But to me, everything felt empty. The heat of anger burned in my chest, while my mother's words echoed in my mind. "Don't you dare, you will not try to steal your sister's credit." I, Sophie, 28 years old, stood there, silent, with a dazed face, trying to understand what had happened. I just wanted to be seen, to be heard, but nothing I did seemed to be enough. While my sister Olivia, the perfect daughter, the golden girl, walked on water in my parents' eyes, I could barely breathe without being criticized. It had always been this way. Ever since. And now, I was being ignored, once again. Since July, I had been sending money to help my family with the bills. Each month, I tightened my budget, said no to dinners with friends, gave up things I wanted, all to help them. But what did I get in return? Deafening silence. Olivia, the favorite, had taken all the credit for herself, and my parents believed her without question. I finally decided to tell the truth, but before I could even say a word, my mother shut me down like I was a liar seeking attention. The words I wanted to scream got stuck in my throat. Frustration was overwhelming me, and all I wanted to do was scream, "Why doesn't anyone see me?" Then something incredible happened. The front door opened, and Olivia walked in, holding a bag of candy in her hand, as if nothing was happening. She glanced at me, and then with that perfect fake smile, asked, with a tone of false joy, what was going on. As if it was the most normal thing in the world. My mother pointed at me and said, "You need to explain it to your sister. She's trying to claim that she helped financially, when we all know it was you, Olivia." But Olivia was unfazed. She froze for a moment, looked at me, and then with an even sweeter smile said, "Oh Mom, Sophie is just jealous. I didn't mean to burden you with this." And I was speechless. How could anyone be so audacious, so cynical? But at that moment, something inside me clicked. It wasn't just about the money. It was about being seen. It was about finally being recognized for who I really was and what I had really done. I looked Olivia in the eye and said, my voice shaking, "I've been sending them money since July. Every month. And you knew that. Don't you dare act like you did it all." And that was when the tension finally broke. My mother, already suspicious, crossed her arms and glared at Olivia. "Yes, Olivia. Would you like to explain why you've been so quiet about this all this time?" Olivia faltered for a brief moment. But then she recovered, smiling again, trying to erase any trace of guilt. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "I helped because, unlike you, I actually care." And at that moment, something changed inside me. I was no longer willing to live in anyone's shadow. Not anymore. I had done what I could. I had sacrificed myself for my family, and finally someone, even my mother, would notice that. This is the story of overcoming obstacles for those who, like me, live on the margins, seeking to be seen, to be heard. It is the story of those who, after a long time, find the courage to stand up and demand the recognition they deserve. Believe me, if you have been through something similar, you are not alone. And change begins with you. Don't let anyone steal the credit for your achievements. Don't let the false kindness of others dim your light. The world needs your truth, your courage. Now, I want to hear your story. Share your experiences and remember, you deserve to be recognized. And if you believe this message can inspire others, share this video. Let's make a difference together. The tension in the room was palpable, as if the air was charged with electricity ready to explode. I was furious, but at the same time, a sense of relief was beginning to rise within me, like a flame that ignites after a long time of darkness. I could no longer bear to live in the shadow of the lie. My body shook as the words escaped my mouth, and I could no longer ignore the weight of the truth. "Are you serious now?" I replied, standing up with such force that my chair scraped the floor. Anger burned inside me, but it was an anger that was no longer just frustration. It was the anger of finally breaking free. "You've been letting them believe a lie for months, Olivia. You knew I was the one sending the money, but you sat there, letting them think it was you. Why? Because you wanted to be the hero." And before Olivia could respond, "Nah," ever the voice of reason, intervened, holding up her hand like a referee trying to calm things down before they got too far. "There's an easy way to resolve this. Olivia, actually show me who was sending the money. Bank statements, screenshots, anything." My dad glanced at my mom, exchanging suspicious glances, but it was Olivia who reacted. She didn't let it get to her. Her usual arrogance was etched on her face, and with an icy smile she said, "If you want proof, here it is." She pulled her phone out of her purse and scrolled to the payment receipts, turning the phone around for my parents to see. The receipts were there. Her name, the amounts, the transaction IDs. Everything looked perfect. But something inside me told me something was wrong. I couldn't let this go. I looked at her defiantly, my heart pounding, and snapped, "That's a lie. You're not the one sending the money, Olivia. You haven't sent a single cent." The room fell into a deathly silence. My parents looked at the receipts and then at me, as if torn between doubt and disbelief. But I knew I couldn't keep quiet any longer. It didn't matter what happened. I wasn't going to let Olivia get away with it. Her face contorted for a moment. She knew the lie was starting to unravel, but still with a sarcastic smile she said, "You're unbelievable." And with a low laugh, she pulled out her phone again, holding it close to her chest like a shield. I wasn't going to back down anymore. I felt the truth rising up inside me, ready to finally be revealed. I grabbed my own phone, my heart racing, my hands shaking, and opened my banking app. But to my dismay, the screen froze. I tried again, but nothing happened. Panic began to rise in my chest, like a wave that threatened to drown me. Olivia wasted no time in scoffing, "Oh, how convenient, huh? The phone just doesn't work when you need it." She crossed her arms, her smile widening in anticipated victory. That's when my father roared, "Sophie, enough. You've embarrassed yourself enough. If you can't prove what you're saying, you should apologize to your sister right now." His words hit me like a blow. The pain of being disbelieved, of being seen as a liar, made my stomach churn. His gaze was cold and final. "If you don't apologize, you can pack your things and leave. I won't let you ruin Christmas with your jealousy." I froze, feeling the weight of all the eyes on me. The room was stuffy. The words wouldn't come out of my mouth. I wanted to scream, I wanted to explode in rage, but deep down, I knew it wasn't my choice. What would I do? Would I swallow my truth, just like I always did? But then something inside me snapped. I was no longer going to be submissive. I was no longer going to live in the shadow of lies. I looked up at my father and with a choked voice said, "I will not apologize. I am tired of living in lies. Tired of being invisible. I will not keep quiet anymore." I saw my father turn pale. I saw the surprise on everyone's faces, but I could not turn back. I grabbed my coat and without looking back, walked out the door. The night was freezing and tears blurred my vision as I walked towards the car. Never in my life had I felt so small, but at the same time, I had never felt so relieved. It was there in the darkness of the night, that something inside me changed. I was leaving behind a life of silence, of hiding in the shadows. I was no longer the invisible person. I was the person who had finally found her voice. Sometimes life tests us, makes us question our truth. But, as I have learned, true strength lies in not allowing anyone to dim your light. Don't let lies win, or others dictate your story. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been through something like this? Have you ever felt invisible, or had your truth erased by others? Share your story in the comments. And if this message touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Together, we can empower and support each other. I drove through the darkness of the night, feeling as though every street I turned was taking me further away from home, further away from the sense of belonging I always thought I had. Christmas, the day that was supposed to be about togetherness, about family, now felt like a lie, a void that swallowed me whole. I was lost, disoriented, unsure of where I was going, but the images of the confrontation with Olivia and my parents kept playing in my head, like a movie that kept repeating itself. How could she do this? How could she deceive us all, and worst of all, how could my parents believe her without question? It was then that, without realizing it, I found myself parked in the courtyard of a 24-hour coffee shop. The lights inside were like a beacon in the darkness, almost disconcerting in the silence of the night. I went inside, still shaking with anger and humiliation, and sought refuge in a corner, my phone in my hands, as if I could force reality to give way. I tried to access my banking app once, twice, 3 times. The same error message. It was as if the entire universe had conspired against me that night. Time seemed to drag on. An hour passed, And I was still sitting there amidst empty coffee cups, my phone staring at me in its uselessness. Then finally, a notification popped up. A text from Nina. "Hey, are you okay? I've been thinking about you. If you need a place to stay, my door is always open. I know I don't know who to trust right now, but you've always been honest with me. Let me know." Those words were like a balm for an open wound. For the first time that night, I felt like someone still believed in me, even if part of me doubted myself. I had no more proof, no more bank statements, no access to my account to show my parents. But at least Nina was there. For a moment, she was my anchor. I needed a place to breathe. And that's what I found at Nina's house. I drove there, my hands still gripping the steering wheel tightly, as if I was trying to hold on to the only thing I had left. When I arrived, she was already at the door, wrapped in a blanket, with a mug of tea in her hands. She didn't press me to talk. She greeted me with silent kindness, handed me the mug, and led me to the couch. There, I could finally release the breath I'd been holding since I left my parents' house. "I'm not lying, Nina," I began, my voice breaking after a few minutes of silence. "I swear I've been sending money every month since July. Olivia knew about it and let everyone think it was her. The receipts she showed me are fake. I know that." Nina looked at me thoughtfully, her expression a mix of concern and doubt. I don't know if I can believe you right now, Sophie," she said hesitantly. "But you have to admit, it doesn't look good, does it? Especially with the app not working. It's like the perfect storm." Those words stung, but I knew Nina was right. What did I have? Only my word against hers. But I couldn't keep quiet any longer. "I know," I muttered, frustration boiling inside me. "But tomorrow, if the bank is back up and running, I'll show them. I'm not going back to that house for Christmas unless I can prove Olivia is lying." Nina looked at me, her expression softening. "You can stay here as long as you need," she said, her voice soothing. "And tomorrow, let's hope the bank systems are back up. But you know, if you come in with evidence, there's no way she can fool everyone. It's not just her that's at stake here, it's your truth." The next morning, I woke up with a faint sense of hope. Maybe, just maybe, the universe had finally decided to give me a chance. But when I opened the banking app, my stomach turned. The same error message appeared. I was lost, with no way out. What was I going to do now? I wanted to scream, to punch the wall, but instead I just stared at the ceiling, my heart pounding, and let the alternatives pile up in my mind. How could I prove my truth without access to the account? How could I find a solution when all seemed lost? Nina knocked on the door, her voice soft. "It's okay, Sophie. No matter what happens, you're not alone. Don't let doubt steal your faith. Sometimes answers don't come the way we expect, and truth isn't something we can prove with a click. But as Nina showed me, the most important thing is to not lose hope, to not give up fighting for our own truth." And now, I want to know, have you ever faced a situation where you had to fight for your truth? Have you ever felt like the world was against you, but found strength in something that seemed small? Share your story. Your experience could be the key to someone finding strength where they thought there was none. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Together, we can overcome the storms that life throws at us. The morning was cold when Nina gently knocked on the door, before peeking in with a smile. She was holding 2 mugs of coffee, but her face fell when she saw my expression. "Still no luck," I shook my head, taking the mug from her. "Nothing," I mumbled. "I don't know what to do, Nina. I can't just show up there with my word against Olivia's. They'll never believe me." Nina sat down next to me, tucking her legs under the blanket. "There has to be a way," she said thoughtfully. "You could call your bank. Maybe they can verify the transfers over the phone." I considered the suggestion, but I knew it wouldn't work. Even if I did, my parents wouldn't let me sit there with the phone explaining everything without disbelieving me. Besides, it was Christmas Day and the banks were closed. I tried the customer service line, but only got the automated message. "We're experiencing a high volume of calls due to technical issues. Please try again later." I hung up, my frustration growing. Everyone must have been calling for the same reason, and now I was completely out of options. "I have to think of another way," I mumbled, more to myself than to Nina. "I can't just show up empty-handed." I sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly into my coffee cup, completely out of ideas. I felt trapped with no way out. There has to be a way, I muttered again to no one in particular, as I fumbled through my phone, aimlessly scrolling through apps and emails, waiting for inspiration to strike. That's when it hit me. Every time I made a transfer to my parents, I would receive an automatic confirmation email from the bank. And these weren't linked to the technical issue the app was having. I nearly dropped my phone, frantically scrolling through it until I found my inbox. It wasn't long before I found them, the clear confirmation emails from July to December, showing the exact amounts I had transferred and the same account numbers linked to my parents. "Look at this, Nina," I yelled, showing her the emails. "It's all here. It's all the proof I need." Relief and determination flooded my chest at the same time, and Nina's eyes widened as she read the emails, her face lighting up with a smile. "You got her now," Nina said confidently. "There's no way Olivia can get away with this." I shook my head firmly, my determination growing. "I'm going to that house, but only with this proof in hand. If she tries to deny it, I'll show those emails to everyone." Finally, I felt like I had control back. Olivia's lies were about to be exposed, and this time, I wasn't going to let her get away with it. As I looked through the confirmation emails, a wave of relief washed over me, but it was quickly followed by a pang of embarrassment. How had I not thought of this before? It was so obvious. But of course, my mind was so overwhelmed from the night before with the accusations and the humiliation of being called a liar that I couldn't think clearly. "God, I'm so stupid for not checking my email sooner," I muttered, shaking my head in frustration at myself. Nina reached out and squeezed my arm, stopping me. "Don't blame yourself," she said softly. "You've been through a lot in the last 24 hours. No wonder you didn't think of this sooner. The important thing is that you found the solution." That reassurance helped ease some of the shame, though I still felt a little silly. I took a deep breath, gathering my courage for what was to come. "Okay," I said, sitting up straight. "Now I have the proof. I'm going to go over there and set the record straight. If they still don't believe me after this, it's their own fault." The two of us walked up to my parents' front door. When my mother opened the door, her eyes were full of disapproval. "So you've decided to come back?" she asked, her voice sharp enough to make me flinch. Olivia was leaning casually against the wall, smiling. "Are you here to apologize, Sophie?" she asked, the mockery evident in her voice. My father stood a little further back, arms crossed, looking as if he'd rather slam the door in my face. "I just want to celebrate Christmas with my family," I said quietly, forcing my voice to sound calm. "I'm sorry, I don't want any more drama." My mother narrowed her eyes but stepped aside to let me in. Olivia walked past me, letting out an irritated sigh. She whispered loud enough for me to hear, "Took you long enough to crawl back." I clenched my fist but kept my expression neutral, letting her think I'd given up. I let everyone think I was there just to face the situation and move on, a slight smile on my face as I stood aloof. The house slowly filled with relatives, cousins, aunts, uncles, all greeting me warmly. None of them noticed the storm about to happen beneath the surface. As we sat down to dinner, my heart raced. I knew Olivia couldn't resist bringing up what had happened last night. It was only a matter of time before she'd cast herself as the victim and turn me into the villain. All I had to do was wait and make sure my proof was ready. It didn't take long for her to seize the spotlight. We all sat around the table, passing plates and making polite conversation. She paused, cleared her throat dramatically, and looked at me with a smile. "I think we all need to talk about the elephant in the room," she said, and the table fell silent. All eyes turned to her as she shifted in her chair, as if she were thinking with concern. "You know, last night was really hard for me," she said, her voice shaking enough to sound sincere. "I never imagined Sophie would stoop so low as to accuse me of lying. It was truly heartbreaking." My stomach churned as whispers spread around the table. Some of my relatives were already looking at me with disapproval, while others seemed stunned by the situation. Olivia didn't stop. "I've always tried to be here for this family," she continued, her voice thick with emotion. "I send money every month to help Mom and Dad. I've never asked for recognition. But to turn around and call me a liar in front of everyone, that's beyond painful." Her performance was flawless. Tears threatened to fall, and her voice shook just enough to sound authentic. My parents nodded. My mother, her face clearly wounded, said, "You don't deserve this, Olivia." Everyone seemed to agree, murmuring in unison, The weight of the judgment was on me. My cousins and aunts stared at me like I was the worst person in the world. I clutched my phone, my pulse pounding, feeling the pressure build. I had been waiting for this moment, but now that it was here, the tension was suffocating. I took a deep breath, clasping my hands together under the table as Olivia continued her act. When she finally stopped dabbing her eyes with a napkin, I seized the moment. "Now it's my turn," I said, my voice calm but firm. All eyes turned to me in surprise, others in complete disdain. I held my phone tightly. "You had your chance to speak, Olivia," I said, ignoring her mockery. "Now it's my turn." She rolled her eyes, and I, steadfast, continued, "I've been sending money to Mom and Dad every month since July. I don't use fancy speeches or ask for recognition, but when Olivia lied last night and said she was the only one doing it, I couldn't stay silent. Now I can prove it." I held up my phone, showing the email confirmation ID. "These are my receipts. They're straight from my bank, showing every transfer I've made to Mom and Dad's account, with the exact dates and amounts." Olivia sat back, smiling. "Oh, please," she said, waving her hand. "Anyone can forge an email these days. Do you really think everyone is going to believe these receipts are real?" I ignored her, feeling my frustration building. "If you're so confident, let's check the dates, Mom, Dad. Did you check the transfers on Olivia's receipts last night? I bet they don't match mine." My parents exchanged uncertain glances. Dad shifted in his chair, rubbing his chin. "We didn't check," he admitted. "We just assumed." "So you trusted her without a doubt?" I replied, my voice sharp. "Now you have a chance to see for yourself." I crossed my arms, daring Olivia to interrupt. "Go check the ATM statements. They show the account numbers for each deposit. You don't need a banking app for that." Olivia's smirk faltered, but she quickly recovered. "Let them check, I have nothing to hide," she said, trying to remain confident. My parents hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "It's Christmas, honey," my mother said softly. "Do we really have to do this?" "Yes," I said, my voice firm. Reluctantly, my father grabbed his coat, and we headed for the nearest ATM. The cool night air hit me as we drove in silence, the tension in the car almost palpable. Dad pulled out his card and pulled up his transaction history. He scrolled through the months, checking the dates against the receipts I'd shown him. When he clicked on a deposit from July, the bank account number showed up, and it was my account. He checked August, September, and each one lined up perfectly with the emails I'd shown him. My mother glanced at the screen and, pale, whispered, "It's Sophie's account." With each transaction, the weight of the truth became clearer. Olivia had lied, and she knew it. By the time we got home, the atmosphere was charged. As we walked into the living room, the murmur of conversation stopped abruptly. All eyes turned to us. Olivia stood in the doorway, furious, throwing off her coat and grabbing her purse. Her face was flushed, her confidence replaced by a smirk now turned to panic. "Olivia," my father said firmly. "We checked the statements. The transfers came from Sophie's account. You're lying to us." The room fell silent. A few relatives exchanged awkward glances, clearly ashamed of believing her. One by one, they began to gather their things and mutter goodbyes in a rush, heading for the door. Olivia's facade finally cracked. She let out a bitter laugh, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I lied, okay? Is that what you wanted to hear?" she cried. "I lied." She looked at me, her voice shaking with frustration. "You told me in July that you didn't want them to make a big deal about the money. You just wanted to help quietly. So I figured, what's the harm in letting them believe it?" Her words hit me like a punch in the gut. "I told you that because I trusted you," I replied, my voice shaking. "I thought you'd be there for me for once. Instead, you've used it to your advantage while I've stood here, unseen. Do you realize how humiliating this has been for me?" Olivia's expression softened for a brief moment, but then she recoiled, becoming defensive again. "They would never believe you," she said bitterly. "You outdid me, Sophie. I just didn't think you'd snap like that." My mother stepped forward, her voice shaking. "Why, Olivia? Why did you do this? We would have been so grateful if any of you had helped." "There was no reason for this." Olivia was silent, not responding. She grabbed her keys and left, slamming the door behind her. The room was silent for a long moment, the weight of her actions sinking into my parents. They turned to me, their faces filling with regret. "Sophie," my father began, his voice grave. "We owe you a huge apology. We should have listened to you, but we didn't. And we're sorry." My mother nodded, tears streaming down her face. "We treated you unfairly for so long. And this was inexcusable. I don't know if we'll ever be able to make up for everything we did, but we'll try. I promise." I stood there, absorbing their words. I wasn't sure how to feel. Part of me wanted to forgive them, but another part was still hurt from years of invisibility, of being forgotten. I looked at them and finally said in a calm voice, "I appreciate the apology, but it doesn't erase everything that happened." They nodded solemnly, as if they finally understood. For the first time, I felt like I had been heard, that the truth had finally been revealed. The evening ended in silence, after the house was emptied of guests. The three of us sat there in the lingering silence. It wasn't the Christmas I had hoped for, but at least for once, I wasn't the villain.